Welcome. Hopefully all of your questions about the anti-fraud campaigns and investigations will be answered here. I'm very pleased to have as our guests today, first off, Laura West, who's standing before you, who is Deputy District Attorney for Sacramento County and the head of the In-Home Supportive Services Fraud Investigation Team. And on the telephone, we have Greg Thompson, who's the Executive Director of PASC, the Public Assistance Services Council, which is the public authority for Los Angeles County. So Ms. West is going to do a PowerPoint presentation. What we have decided is we're going to try to cut our talking, make it as succinct as possible to give you all as much time as you want to have your questions answered. So, Ms. West has been a district attorney for almost 14 years. She will explain to you what her background is within the legal world, and explain exactly what her task force does. I want to bring up my point of view that up until a few years ago, we didn't hear too much about anti-fraud in IHSS. This governor that we have at the moment has said very publicly that he thinks we have a very high percentage of fraud. He has quoted repeatedly 25% of fraud. And then 2 years ago, in February 2 years ago, the budget impasse for that year was broken by a Big Five meeting that negotiated a deal that included a certain gentleman getting named lieutenant governor and his vote in return for anti-fraud initiative that was passed into law. And that's what broke the budget impasse that year. And since then, we've been hearing all kinds of stories, all kinds of news reports, and a lot of people have had fear and a lot of questions about what does that mean? Because the assumption is, the public assumption is, we people on receiving in-home supportive services are committing some kind of fraud. So hopefully when you leave here today, you'll know the truth. And there are changes that have happened because of that law, including the requirement for criminal background investigations, otherwise known as CBIs, on our providers. So I'm sure those of you who receive IHSS services are aware of that, and that's impacted your providers, whether you're existing providers or getting new providers. That's part of anti-fraud. And as in any aspect of society, there is fraud. We are not here to say that there is no fraud in IHSS. It's a question of what kind of fraud, what we can do to prevent it, and how we can report on it correctly or effectively or truthfully. There is fraud committed upon consumers who receive services, and there is also fraud, obviously, toward any system, including Medi-Cal and Medicare. Some of you have heard news reports. What we've done is there are handouts at the table. Those handouts include the brochures that are given providers, the brochures that are prepared by the state of California that give providers the information of what's okay to do and what's not okay to do, the definition of Medicare and Medi-Cal fraud, fraud hotline, how to prevent fraud. Then there's my little two-page presentation, which is similar but comes from a consumer point of view, my own experience, how to avoid fraud being perpetrated upon you as a consumer, what happens if you are accused of fraud, how to defend yourself, the kinds of records you need to keep, and how to avoid being accused of fraud. I myself was investigated for fraud and I've survived. So with that introduction, I hand it over to Ms. West.
Thank you very much, Sandy. And thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak to you today. I know that the topic is protecting yourself from fraud as a consumer, and part of what I will talk about during my presentation will cover that. But more so, I want to talk to you about protecting the program from fraud and talk about some of the issues that my task force has uncovered over this past year. I know that we are short on time. What time is it now? My clock watcher. 3:35. Okay, so I know the presentation, or the whole session is scheduled to end at 4, and my portion of speaking is only a portion of that time that's left. So what I know on the front end is I won't be able to tell you everything I'd like to. I also know that I will be so rushed that I'll talk very quickly, so I'll try to slow myself down because I'm by nature a fast talker. But I also want to let you know that I can stay past 4 o'clock myself. So if you have questions or if you wanted to learn more, I'm happy to stay and talk. Okay, so with that said, I will jump right in. Well, let me back up and first tell you a little bit about myself and my team before I talk about what we found. So as Sandy mentioned, I've been a deputy district attorney for almost 14 years. And I know I should never assume that people know what that means. So I always ask, anybody here a fan of the show Law and Order? Or even know what it is? You know, dun 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 dun, that show. Okay, so the first part of the show, police investigate. And then they take the case to the district attorney's office for prosecution. That's what I do. So in that job, I have been very fortunate to work in a number of assignments, including I've prosecuted people who manufacture and sell drugs. I've prosecuted gang members. I've prosecuted people that physically and sexually abuse children, domestic violence, general felonies, people that have stolen or robbed from others. I was on the BAT team when I was a DA here in Santa Clara County, which stood for burglary, assault, theft. So you name it, I've done a lot of different kind of prosecutions. I grew up here in Santa Clara County, went to school here actually, and coming here to the hotel brings back some memories because there used to be a little dance club in the lobby that my friend Pam and I used to go to in our younger 20s. So I was a DA here in Santa Clara County. I've also worked in Sonoma County. Anybody from Sonoma County here? No? It's a beautiful place. I was a DA there, and also Alameda County, right out of law school. Anybody from Alameda County? All right, that was my first place. And for the past 9 years, I've been a member of the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office. My last assignment before this was working as a community prosecutor. I know we have some, at least, I think Ned's in the back, we have at least one Santa Clara person in the house. I worked in a certain area of Sacramento that was kind of high crime, plagued with crime. And I was a community prosecutor, which meant I worked in the community with community members to identify what the chronic problems were that were bringing down their quality of life, making it unsafe for them in their neighborhoods, in their businesses. And then working with community members and law enforcement, we built a team to address those things. And that's what I did for the 4 years before I was selected to head the task force. So in Sacramento County, our task force began in June of 2009. We are a 4-agency, multidisciplinary task force. 2 full-time members of my team are IHSS social workers, and I can tell you, as I tell anybody that I ever speak to in the state, I think that is what makes us so effective. I know that that has been hugely helpful to me personally, and I encourage anybody that's working in IHSS fraud prevention to reach out to and partner with social workers, and that's what we've done in our county. We also have investigators and staff from the district attorney's office. I am the only attorney on the team, and we have investigators from our Department of Human Assistance. We also have 2 full-time Medi-Cal investigators from the state. And the Medi-Cal investigators are very helpful to Sacramento insofar as they have access to databases and information that most counties do not. And I'll talk to you in a little bit about how that is helpful to us and how I think it can help others throughout the state if they tap into that. So we have been up and running a little over 1 year. Last fiscal year was our first. And we early on knew that the most important thing was to develop our plan, and so we spent our first 60 days working on our plan. Our plan focuses largely on prevention, early detection, and then some part is prosecution. But we know that prosecuting offenders at the end of the line, after the money has already left the program, is ineffective for fraud prevention because very few of those dollars come back to the program. Even people that I have personally prosecuted and they're ordered to pay it back, a very small percent is recovered. So we knew that our efforts needed to focus the most on fraud prevention, which is, education is a big part of that, early detection. And then prosecution, because it has its place in the solution, is just not the solution. So I want to talk to you about what our plan was and what we found. First, we did a lot of studying what's going on in the program. How is fraud being committed? What are the ways people are doing it? So we could figure out how to prevent them from doing it. And we asked, are there vulnerabilities? Are there ways that people can exploit to commit fraud in the program? And the sad truth is that yes, there are many ways. It's unfortunate because my personal take is the way that the program is designed, it is perfect for those that are using the program honorably and serving in the program honorably, which I believe is the majority of people. But unfortunately, the program by design has many opportunities for people who would exploit it. And those that want to steal from the program can do it without very much difficulty. And so I'm going to talk to you about my own experience, what I've seen, that makes me know this is a problem worth tackling. So we'll talk about the types of IHSS fraud, both that I've seen in Sacramento, but I also know because throughout this year I've worked in the statewide stakeholders group, and I've spoken to investigators and staff throughout the state. I know what's happening in Sacramento is not unique to Sacramento. It's the same game pretty much everywhere. The past Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I was actually teaching at a statewide convention for California Welfare Fraud Investigators Association. And so I've been able to talk to people throughout the state, and I know that these same things are happening over and over. So I know that they are things that we need to fix to protect the program. Also, I'm going to talk to you about the idea of overpayments, because overpayments just means money that went out for the program that should not have. Sometimes that happens because people don't understand the rules. Maybe they don't know or really appreciate that you can't claim hours for caring for somebody when they're already living in a skilled nursing facility. And if they do not know that that is wrong, it's not a crime. To be a crime, you have to have criminal intent. You have to know something is wrong and then do it anyway. But even if they don't have criminal intent, even if they aren't doing it for the wrong reasons, when it happens, that's precious money that's leaving the program that shouldn't. And so we want to look at ways to prevent overpayments. That's just as important as going after fraud, because we know that that costs precious dollars too. In my experience working with the team, I think the best way, the best approach, is to communicate and collaborate with everybody that's working in the arena. It's important for law enforcement to work with the program side of the house. It's important to work with social workers, to work with the community. I personally attend our own IHSS Advisory Committee meeting every month, or a member of my team does. And we also collaborate and cooperate very closely with our public authority in Sacramento County. When I just went and spoke to 175 investigators throughout the state, that's what I told them they should be doing too, in my humble opinion. Because we all need to be talking to one another, to be partnering with one another, because no one alone can solve this problem. But I honestly believe from my experience as a prosecutor working in communities that people coming together, good people, honest people working together can make a difference. I've seen it happen. I believe that can happen. From my perspective, I think the unfortunate way that this came to be, which whether it happened in a backroom deal in Sacramento 2 years ago, I don't know one way or the other, but the way that it did happen, I think, is unfortunate because it's caused a divide, I think, between people in the consumer and provider community in law enforcement. And there's a lot of fear and misunderstanding. And I think fear and misunderstanding lead to anger, and there's a lot of this going on, would really, I believe, that we should all be on the same team. And so I think it just takes a matter of us getting to know one another, of law enforcement reaching out, understanding your concerns, and you understanding what we're seeing. So in the short time I have left, I want to do that. But like I said, even after today, you are welcome to contact me anytime. I'll provide you with my direct number and my email address, and I'm happy to talk to anybody at any time. So on my team, as I mentioned, we want to do a lot on the prevention end. We don't want to constantly just chase after people who have stolen the money because the money's already gone. We want to tighten up on the front, prevent as much as we can, detect it as early as we can, and then prosecute appropriately. And we want to prevent overpayments through education. Okay, so I told you about my background as a DA, and I've learned some things, and actually some sad things over those years, and so I kind of sum it up like this in a way. There's a spectrum of people in any community I've ever worked in, and I'm sure where you live too. There, you name it. There's all the way from the nicest, most golden person through and through you could ever meet to the worst of the worst. That's just how it is.